Um, good day, everyone, and welcome to the Regenesis webinar on crime and violence prevention. We are just waiting here. The Brigadier Manamela, I'm sure she will join us very soon, because we had General Kukuni, who was going to be joining us from SAPS, but he has got other commitment which is clashing with our webinar. But he has delegated Brigadier Manamela to be the representative, and I'm sure she's going to join us soon. But in the panel, I've got experts, people who have been working in the area of crime prevention and crime research, from the business, from the government, and from civil society. They are represented here, and they are the ones who will be leading the discussion in terms of this very important issue. I just want to indicate in terms of your participation that you will be allowed to make your inputs via the chat. We won't allow people to talk. If you have got a question or an issue you want to raise, put it in the chat box. There is a chat. If you go, you just put your on the screen. You put your cursor there. You will see underneath there's something called a chat, and you click on that. Then you can type your questions or your comments. I'm just doing that so that everyone can see that. And you enter, and then it will appear for everyone. So Mankosha Malachi, I see your hand, it's up. But if you can put your notes in the chat box, then we will respond to your questions as we move on. I just want to introduce our panel. I will start with Ms. Bilkis Omar, who is the Chief Director, Policy Development and Research at the Civilian Secretariat for Police. She manages the policy development process on policing, which is geared at contributing to effective and professional policing and ensuring the police reach their long-term goals and vision of a safer South Africa. Her past accomplishments include managing the development of the 2016 White Paper on Policing and the 2016 White Paper on Safety and Security, as well as other policies and research projects. Most recently, she was part of the finalization of the Cabinet-adopted Integrated Crime and Violence Prevention Strategy. And before joining government, Bilkis worked for civil society, conducting research around issues of policing, crime, and safety. As an independent researcher, she contributed to the United Nations World Drug Report by focusing on heroin trafficking in SADC. She has got an honors degree in criminology and always wanted to influence government policy on policing, crime, and safety. And her current post actually allows her to do that. The next one on the panel is Dr. Andrew Fall, who is a senior researcher in the Justice and Violence Prevention Program at the Institute for Security Studies, where he leads efforts to promote evidence-based policing in the country and supports government violence reduction efforts. He was educated at the University of Cape Town and Oxford, and is the author of numerous publications, including the books Behind the Badge, The Untold Stories of South Africa's Police Service Members, and Police Work and Identity, a South African Ethnography. Andrew is a research associate with the Center of Criminology at the University of Cape Town, co-convener of the Global Law Enforcement and Public Health Association Special Interest Group on Violence Prevention, and a former police reservist. So he has got experience even working as a reservist in the police rather than just researching from outside. The next panelist is Mr. Foshier Beggars, the head of the National Programs at Business Against Crime South Africa, which is a division of Business Leadership South Africa. He has years worth of experience within the crime intelligence field. He initially joined Business Against Crime in January 2005, and he left the organization in 2013. He then rejoined Business Against Crime SA in January 2018, and has been responsible for all crime prevention projects. To date, Mr. Beggars and his team have successfully initiated and implemented what we call the Eyes and Ears Initiative: information sharing, predictive analysis, extortion business, which all of you might know about people that come and say, we need 30% in your construction business. He has done work in illicit trade, the motor vehicle crime prevention program, and the microdot technology project. He works closely with the private sector, SAPS, the Department of Transport, and the South African Revenue Service. One of BAC's roles is to partner with government when invited, and they share expertise, information, processes, and technologies resident in business. He strongly believes that a collaboration between businesses and the law enforcement agencies has the potential to fight crime more successfully. Mr. Beggars specializes in use of technology to prevent crime and to improve law enforcement, which includes technology-assisted law enforcement, which includes automatic number plate recognition, microdot technology for motor vehicles and other assets, and systems integration. He holds a BCom degree in information systems and economics from the University of South Africa, a national diploma in computer data processing from Technikon SA, a national diploma in agriculture from Tshwane University of Technology. Those are the people who are on our screen. I see there's a message here from Brigadier Malachi, which says that Brigadier Manamela will join us soon, and I will just I'll just introduce her in her absence. When she joined us, you would have known her. Brigadier Manamela is responsible for quality assurance and help desk in the South African Police Service. She has been with SAP's Crime Register Environment since 2016. Prior to being with SAPS, she worked for Statistics South Africa for 5 years as a statistician in survey areas, and seven years in the South African National Statistics Systems Division as a chief statistician responsible for the production of quality statistics among partners in the South African National Statistics System. So the registrar has got statisticians. Some people, when they listen to the police, they think that no, it's just those people you see in uniform. Because you have got scientists, you have got statisticians, you have got pilots, you have got engineers, and so on in SAPS. So that's our panel. I see that it says Brigadier Manamela has just joined. Can we have you, Brigadier Manamela, on our panel? If we can see your face, because we would want people to see you. Yes, we have already introduced you, Brigadier Manamela, and welcome. In terms of the lineup, I'll give the panel members between 10 and not more than 20 minutes, just to make an input to start our conversation. The lineup will start with Ms. Bilkis Oma, and then we will get an input by Brigadier Manamela, and followed by Dr. Andrew Fall, and then lastly, Mr. Foshier Beggars. I've given them a brief, each one of them, in terms of what they should focus on. The issue here is that crime is an albatross to this administration, and it affects our economy. It has got an impact on the poor. It contributes to the levels of inequality in our country. So no matter how much money we raise from our taxes, as long as crime is there, it end up consuming a large number of it. And as we were coming here to this webinar, the Statistician General was releasing their Victims of Crime report, which measures in terms of how do South Africans feel safe and how is crime impacting on them. And the picture is not looking good. It says that we are going backwards. And this webinar, it's going to say what is it that we need to do to have this crime and violence in our country so that people can feel and are safe in their living spaces. So I have indicated for those who have just joined in, if you have a question or a comment, just go to our chat and you type your comment there, and then we will make sure that we raise your issue, and then the panelists are going to respond to it. If I can hand over to you, Bilkis, to make your input. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rapia. Good morning, good day to Mr. Rapia and the panel members and the participants on this platform. And a big thank you for inviting us and awarding us this opportunity to speak today and to Regenesis as well. I think it's an important topic, and from the Civilian Secretariat side, it's something that we want to discuss based on developments that have happened recently in the Secretariat. So the question posed, Mr. Appiah, is not a new question, because crime and violence have been at the forefront of everyone's even dinner table. It's been a subject of various policies in the past, because I mean, crime and violence has been plaguing us for many years. I want to just go back to the National Crime Prevention Strategy. When I mentioned various policies and strategies, you would, and some of you would recall the 1996 National Crime Prevention Strategy and the 1998 White Paper on Safety and Security. And these were very good policies of government, which were partially implemented. So in order to address this, and from a government perspective, we were asked to look at the issue of crime and violence. Why isn't it getting better? And we decided to review the policies, the 1996 strategy and the 1998 White Paper on Safety and Security. And it took us a few years. We came up with the 2016 White Paper on Safety and Security, a 2016 White Paper on Policing. And I know people are tired of hearing about policies and strategies and plans and poor implementation. But it's critical for me to talk about this this process, because from government side, and remember, the Civilian Secretariat, we don't implement our policies. The policies are for SAPS to implement and for the rest of government, and I'll talk to this a bit just now. So, sorry, I need to make a rider also. I have the flu, so I sound a bit funny, but let me continue. So I mentioned that we were tasked to review this, to the strategy and the policy, and we came up with a holistic strategy called the Integrated Crime and Violence Prevention Strategy, which was adopted by Cabinet in March this year. So we at the point where we are rolling out or assisting with the facilitation of this strategy across government. Maybe I should just give some input into the strategy and what it means. So the whole idea of this is to prevent crime and violence. So when we want to halve crime and violence by 2030, prevention is a very important element of halving crime. And it's similar to the 1998 White Paper and the NCPS. And like I said, we borrowed a lot from these two policies in the strategy because we found them to be very good documents. So the focus is to prevent crime and violence, which is a precondition for safety and building safer communities. I think we all know that. So it takes on, the strategy recognizes that crime and violence arise from a multiplicity of socio-economic factors, and that it's the impact of risk factors to crime and violence on a person's life, including the individual, the community, the structural factors, environmental, cultural, and social factors, and how these things impact on a person's life. So we recognize that violence results from a combination of these factors. I must also note that we call it the Integrated Crime and Violence Prevention Strategy. Previously, it was only referring to crime. We've added violence because we know violence is quite endemic in South Africa, and we wanted to include violence in order to address violence as well. Now, I'm not going to go into the details. Safe to say that this strategy rests on 6 pillars. So when we were drafting this white paper and the strategy, we decided we needed pillars that will address the whole of government. So the first one we looked at was the effective criminal justice system. So we want an efficient and responsive criminal justice system. How do we get that? So we've developed indicators in the strategy for which government departments need to implement. But another area we looked at is, and I spoke about violence, so we looked at early intervention to prevent crime and violence. So in a child's life, in a toddler's life, in a young school person's life. So that's another pillar. The other one was victim support, because we need quality support for victims, because even if you're going to halve crime and violence, they're still going to be victims to crime and violence. So how do we support them? Now, these are not new. And I'm sure Andrew is making notes because Andrew is going to ask what's new. So the whole point of the review process was to identify what works, what was good, what we should retain, and not come up with new things. So victim support is another pillar. The fourth pillar is safety to environmental design. And from here, I'm taking you down now to local government level. So we're looking at integration of safety principles into urban and rural planning. So how can we make the communities that we live in safer for the inhabitants? The fifth pillar is active public and community participation. And we know CPS played a big role in last year's July violence. So how do we sustain these structures and these forums and ensure that there's coordination and collaboration of these on community safety? And then the last one is effective and integrated service delivery for safety, security, and violence prevention. And here too, we're talking about the role of local government, but provincial and national government as well in preventing crimes. So what would it take for, and also, we also want to move away from the perception that it's the role of the police to address crime and violence only. We are saying, and this strategy is a whole of government and it's a whole of society approach. So we are saying that it goes beyond the purview of the police. So it needs more. It needs the whole of government. So, but more importantly, and what I want to talk about is, so that's a background basically on the strategy. The approach of this implementing the strategy is critical, and I think that's what everybody wants to know. As I mentioned, people are tired of policy strategies. People want implementation. So approach, and I mentioned it's whole of government and whole of society approach, and it focuses on prevention. So we think there should be complementary interventions to address the drivers of crime. So we identify socioeconomic factors that are the hindrance or the risk factors, and these are inequality, unemployment, challenges in social welfare, health, education, and a whole lot. But more importantly, the strategy clarifies the role of government. So and particularly at local government level, because we feel that local government has a big role to play in safety. And this is based on a lot of the research we've done in the past few years that, little things like ensuring there's street lights and that bushes are cut ensures that there is safety in an area. So local government needs to ensure that they do their work. And during our consultation process, there was a lot of requests for funding. Every forum that we met with within the 3 years of the government asked, are you coming with new funding for this strategy? And it doesn't require new funding. It requires departments to do their job. So if municipalities or if SAPS informs municipalities that there are no street lights in a particular area, municipality is compelled to ensure that the street lights are put in place. Similarly, if there's a big flay, across my house is a flay. The flay, if it's not cut, there was an attempted rape 1 year. So how do the local government has to ensure that the grass or the bush is cut, and that the propensity for crime or violence or rape or murder happening in those areas are dealt with. So what we've done is, even when we consulted local government, we spoke to them about the basics. I'm giving very simple examples just so that people can understand what we're talking about. When you talk to local government about safety, they think about the fire brigade and fire station. They think the role of safety is a SAPS's role. And we try to change a mindset, and it's going to require a mindset change over the years. And we started doing that. So our role as a civilian secretariat, I mentioned earlier that we don't implement, but we are facilitating the implementation of the strategy, because we don't want another policy or another strategy sitting on the shelf somewhere and not being implemented. So we started doing a whole lot of things to ensure that the relevant departments implement. Now, Mr. Rapia, I can go on and on because it seems like a favorite topic of mine. But I just want to talk about, because I think people are fed up that government makes promises and none of these promises are kept. But I just quickly want to talk about what approach we've come with in order to ensure that these different spheres of government implement. So firstly, we've located this strategy not at the Secretariat or at SAPS. We've located it at the Presidency, and Cabinet has accepted this because we try to say that a whole of government approach requires a political champion, and that should be the President. So firstly, it's located at the Presidency, and in provinces, it's located at the offices of the premiers. So the office of the premier has to ensure that his provincial department and then local government as well, even though local government is autonomous, but that local government is implements this strategy. The Presidential Coordinating Council at a national level ensures that all of these stakeholders are represented and that this they would eventually give feedback on how far they are with implementation. I also mentioned that we've developed performance indicators for all of the APPs and strategic plans for departments, so national government, local government, provincial government, and we're saying incorporate these indicators in your APP and your strategic plan, and in that way it will be funded. But funding also, it shouldn't be an issue. The fiscus has no money. What we're recommending is look at what works, what doesn't work. For example, one of the provinces told us that they're reprioritizing money from a program on youth that never worked into safety and violence prevention. So it's that kind of request that we are making of the departments. We need the willingness of the departments to work on this, and we've been trying to sell this at every level, and even at cabinet level when we presented it over the years, the strategy, there was very good buy-in, and we're using the district development model. So I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with the district development model, but this is a model that is promoting an integrated approach that seeks to address the silos and lack of coherence of planning and implementation in all of government. And we are arguing, and the Department of Cooperative Governance is running this. So we are arguing with them that you can't have development without safety, and that safety is a critical feature in. So districts that are implementing this district development model are then doing a diagnostic of crime in the area through our Department of Community Safety and to the Department of Cooperative Governance. So they're ensuring that safety is on the agenda, and that development can take around these areas. I'm going to stop there, Mr. Appiah. I can speak more. For example, I want to talk about COVID-19. I thought while it was with its challenges and the lockdown affected the economy and a lot of businesses, I think the whole process that the president with the ministers undertook to deal with COVID-19 is what we should be doing with crime and violence, and that it needs a coordinated effort of ministers and officials of government to ensure that this strategy is implemented. So I'll stop there and take questions. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for that, and I encourage the participants to put their questions on the chats. I will now ask Brigadier Wayland Manamela to make her input, which is going to give us a 10-year view of the state of crime and violence in our country, the underlying causes from the perspective of SAPS, as well as the outlook towards achieving this goal of halving crime and violence by 2030. Brigadier Manamela.
Good afternoon, Mr. Appiah, and the participants on this platform. I thought perhaps maybe I should have been the first one.
Just sorry, your camera is facing the ceiling. If you can just try to tilt your screen.
Can you see me?
Not push it again so that they can see you. It's still going to, are you on the, are you using the phone? Oh, okay, now it's upside down.
Upside down again. Now
yeah, we saw you and you were upside down. Maybe just try to turn it around.
I'm using this tablet and it's a, where is it?
Oh, it's the tablet.
Now you can see me.
No, but you're upside down. So from the one which is facing down, just take it around and see how it goes. Turn it around. Try to turn it around and then the bottom goes to the top.
Am I visible now?
Not dark.
Dark, red.
Okay. Maybe let's just proceed. Over time, then you will get it right. But I think for now, present and then let's move on.
In front of me, it's a presentation that we managed to put together, particularly looking at the 10-year period in terms of the contact crimes, property-related crimes, and overall the 17 community reported crimes. So in our presentation, we are doing a comparison of a 10-year period as well as year on year. So this presentation is particularly the one that we released last year, which is the 2020-2021 financial year. We could not provide the most recent statistics for 2021-22 because it is not yet released to the public. Now, when we look at the contact crimes, in particular for the past 10 years, the contact crimes recorded a decrease of 13.1%, which is about 80,780. But when we looked into the individual crimes, murder, for example, in the past 10 years, we observed an increase of 4,418 counts of murder, which is a 28% increase. Sexual offenses, they recorded an increase of 14,325, which is 24%. Attempted murder, they were also on the increase, having recorded an increase of 3,977, which is 27%. Assault GBH, assault common robberies, they have all declined with a percentage decline of 17 to 28%. And we also had the robbery with aggravating circumstances, which includes the carjacking, house robberies, business robberies, cash in transit, and truck jackings, which increased in the past 10 years by 19,702, which is approximately 19%. But when you look at year in year, then the dynamics of the COVID-19 comes into play for that particular financial year of 2020-21. You can still remember by 2020-2021, that is where we were still at a very high levels of lockdown. And in those particular periods, when 2020-2021 compared to 2019-2020, we observed almost all the crimes that forms part of the contact crimes recording decreases. Murder, for example, decreasing by 1,353, which is 6.3%. Sexual offenses, 7,079. Assault GBH, 23,327. Common assault, 16,052. Common robbery, 14,177. Robbery with aggravating circumstances, reducing by 24,149. The only crime category that recorded an increase during 2020-21 under contact crimes was the attempted murders, which increased by 72. Overall, the contact crimes during the 2020-21 recorded a decrease of 86,065, which is 14% decrease. When we zoom into the total sexual offenses, all of them, the categories of the total sexual offenses, that's your rape, sexual assault, attempted sexual assault, contact sexual offenses, for the period, for the 10-year period, were all on the decline. Similarly, even on doing 2020 and 2021 comparison with the previous financial year, they were also on the decline. And then when we move to the contact related, that is where we speak of arsons and the malicious damage to properties. During the past 10 years, we've also observed decreases across the two crime categories that forms part of the total contact-related crimes. That's your arson and malicious damage to property, recording a decline of 18%. And the year-on-year comparison, 2020, 2021, and 2019, 2020, they also, the two of them, recorded a decrease, recording a decrease of 9,975, which is almost 9% decline. Property-related, for the past 10 years, they were all also on the decline. That is your burglary at non-residential premises, burglaries at residential premises, theft of motor vehicles and motorcycles, theft out of motor vehicles, and stock theft. In the past 10 years, we have observed a declining trend in all these particular crimes, recording a decrease of 30.3%, which is 160,879. 2021 compared to 1920, they were also on the decline, having recorded a decline of 21.2%, a total of 99,479. Other serious offenses, they were also on the decline, having recorded a decline of 173,730 in the past 10 years, which is a decline of 32 or 33%. And then during the period 2020, 21, and 1920, they were also on the decline, having registered a decline of 267,522, which is a 16% decline. Now, when we also zoom into those crimes that were detected as a result of police action, in the past 10 years, illegal possession of firearms were on the decline, having recorded a decline of 10%. Drug-related crimes were also on the decline. Driving under the influence of alcohol declined by 48%. And the only offense to record an increase was sexual offenses detected as a result of police action, having increased by 154%. That is a total of 4,220 incidents. The financial year 2021 and 1920, all the crimes under this particular category of a crime detected as a result of police actions were on the decline. Interestingly, when we zoom into the issues of murder in particular, when we look at the contributing factors, am I still visible?
No, we can see your slide. It's fine. You can go ahead and show us your slide, yeah.
When we look in terms of the causative factors of murder, these were the statistics that were released during this first quarter of April to June. These are the recurrent kind of factors that we observe insofar as the murders are concerned. We observed that 898 murders that were committed were the results of arguments and misunderstanding or road rage, as well as provocations. And then we had murders, a total of 484, of which were the result of retaliation, revenge, or punishment. And those that were as a result of vigilantism as well as mob justice were 472. And there were those that were robbery related, which is 358. And we also had matters that were the results of illicit mining, a total of which were 7. There were those that were rape related with a total of 24, and majority of those were in KZN with a total of 12. And there were also those other matters that were as a result of commissioning of other crimes with a total of 32 of matters recorded. And also the place of occurrence of the matters, and insofar as the place of occurrence for matters, 2,733 of the matters occurred at the public places such as street or open field, recreational facilities, parks, beaches, parking or abandoned areas or abandoned buildings. 1,746 of those occurred within the residence of perpetrators or victims. That is, these are the people that are known to each other, and often this is a problem for policing because the conventional policing way wouldn't be able to depict or detect this kind of matters that occurs within the residence of victims or perpetrators. And there were also matters that occurred during in the mode of transport, such as buses and cars, and those in liquor outlets, business premises, and matters that occurred on public transport premises, agricultural land, sea dumping site, educational facilities, and also matters at mining areas. Perhaps we can also move to the issues of rape, and also let's zoom into the circumstances and the place of occurrence for rapes. In the place of occurrence, majority of the rapes occurred at the residence of perpetrators or victims. This, like I indicated with the matters, it's between the people that are known to each other. And they are followed by those rapes that occurred in public places such as streets or open field and recreational facilities, as well as those in mode of transport. Business premises, the rapes that occurred within business premises, we have recorded a total of 21 of such incidents having occurred at business premises. Moving on to the issues of kidnappings. Before moving to kidnappings, we can also look at the issues around the domestic violence. So we observed a total of 106 of incidents of murder that were committed against females in a domestic related settings, and 95 of the murders resulting from domestic violence were against the male, and a total of 201 murders for the period April to June of murders were recorded that were close related to domestic violence. And we also had a total of 673 of rape-related incidents that occurred in domestic violence settings, and they affected a total of 641 females compared to only 32 males. Looking at the assaults, GBH, we had a total of 3,686 female being victims of assault GBH in a domestic related incidents, and males, the total was only 1,499. And there were also those common assaults with a total of 11,927. And there was also malicious damage to properties that occurred in a domestic violence related setting. Now, I think let's move to the kidnappings. So over the 10-year period, we've been observing an increase in the incidence of kidnappings, having increased from 3,568 in 2011-2012 to a total of 6,036 kidnappings recorded as at the end of 2020-21, which is a reduction of 8.9% or 95 incidents. Or no, not necessarily 95, or 587 incidents. So when you look at the provinces, almost all the provinces had a decrease, recorded decreases, with the exception of Mpumalanga, as well as the Western Cape, that recorded increases of 49 and 95 respectively. So let's move on to the circumstances around the kidnappings. When we look at the circumstances or the causative factors related to kidnappings, a total of 1,443 incidents of kidnapping were the results of hijackings. Robbery-related kidnappings were 536. Rape-related kidnappings were 296, and retaliations related kidnappings were 224, tax-related 164, domestic-related 121, kidnappings for ransom, which is a serious concern for law enforcement and the communities at large. The numbers were 86, and majority of these occurred in Gauteng. And children removed from their guardians or parents, the total of which were 77, that is their abductions, and the extortions were 54, intimidations related were 45, human trafficking, they were 17, and majority of human trafficking in Gauteng were recorded with a total of 17. And mob justice related, there were 9 incidents of kidnappings related. In conclusion, I think for these levels of crimes to be drastically dealt with, an intergovernmental approach is necessary to bring down the levels of these crimes. For example, if you look at the issues around inadequate housing, issues around slow economic growth, issues of high levels of schools dropout and porous borders, adds to the seriousness of these crimes blossoming in the country. And when you look at the issues around the top 30 stations contact crimes and the property related, some of these causative factors, they are sort of racially polarized, because if you look at the top 30 contact crimes stations, the majorities of the stations that lies under the contact crimes are those stations that are historically in the Black township areas. And when you look at those that are property related, majorities of the stations are lying in the urban-based kind of police stations, which means that then that the majority of the Black population that is sitting in areas with low economic growth, high levels of unemployment, they move from their place of occurrence, going to the urbanized areas to commit all sorts of crimes. And later on, when they come back to their sites, their areas of residence, when having successfully committed all these sorts of crimes, they then engage on other activities such as alcohol abuse, drug abuse, and once they consume all those kind of things, then they start the issues of arguments, issues of rapes, issues of fighting and arguing amongst each other, and then begins the stories of people killing each other, people raping, and people then stealing even more. When we also look at the other issues that were prominent in the statistics that I've touched on are issues of arguments and misunderstanding, and leading to many of manifestations of murders and rapes and all that. And there's also a place of occurrence for certain crimes, which are often impossible for the conventional way of policing. That is, a majority of victims of rapes occurring between people that are known to each other, murders occurring between people that knows each other, and so forth. Those are some of the dynamics that are impossible for police to detect and deal with precisely, because the conventional way of policing is unable to detect those early. And the issues of environmental design also is another issue, especially around informal settlements, where the issues of lack of street lights and so forth, when crimes are perpetrated within those kind of settings, it takes a lot of time for police to react and be at the crime scene within a stipulated time limits that is acquired, because issues of lack of street numbers, street lights at night, and so forth are a concern for policing to effectively be conducted. And also, police work is not the only influence on crime, because for the police to win crime, we need solid working relations with the community, with NGOs, civil society, intergovernmental working relations. We need everyone on board so that together we can fight this crime. We need people to report crime. We need communities to be vocal about crime. We need communities not to hide criminals who are staying with us in our respective communities. If all of us can come on board and perform our duties of ensuring that we root out crime in our communities, we can be in better position to decisively deal with crime. Thank you.
Thank you, Brigadier Manamela. I will now call on Dr. Andrew Fall to make his input on whether it is possible to reduce crime and violence by 50% by 2030, and what will be required to achieve this target.
Thank you very much, Alvin, and good afternoon, colleagues. Thanks very much for having me as part of this panel. So, as mentioned, I've been asked to reflect on whether it's possible to reduce crime and violence by 50% by 2030, and what will be required to achieve this target. I wouldn't be surprised if many in the audience thought that this idea was rather preposterous. In fact, I suspect many in government probably think it's a preposterous idea. And in many ways, they would be right to think so. But I think I'm an optimist in this area and a realist. And I'm going to argue today that with the right combination of leadership, management, integrity, and focus, I think this potentially preposterous proposal is possible. Not only do I think it's possible, I think that addressing serious violent crime together with elite corruption should be a top priority for government. I hesitate to say the top priority. I realize that. Sorry, let me. Somebody's microphone is on. If you could mute yourself, please. Anyone? Okay, it's fine. So I hesitate to say it should be the priority. I realize that I work in this area. We all want to think that our area is the most important thing. So if not the top priority, I think that reducing serious violent crime and elite corruption must be amongst government's top priorities. As Bilk has pointed out, if we can get safety right, we'll be far better positioned to address all the other challenges that our country faces. And just to remind us of some of the harms caused by crime and violence, I'd like to flag a few key trends and figures. In 2021, the Institute for Economics and Peace, which is an international, well, I think it's an American or European organization, but they do a global evaluation every year. And they estimated that the cost of violence to South Africa was the equivalent to 15% of our GDP. This alone is a staggering amount of money, the kind of which could build untold houses, stimulate economic growth, educate people, address all sorts of those challenges that Brigadier Manamela was talking about need to be addressed. Similarly, Gallup's Law and Order Index, another international comparison, ranked South Africa amongst the weakest of 115 countries in 2021 in terms of our policing and safety. And there they're specifically talking about looking at how safe South Africans feel. So it's subjective, but South Africans feel less safe than almost, well, 105 of those other 115 countries. And then finally, as we've just seen in the stats, violent and organized crime is on the rise, and it has been for a while. Since 2011-12, there's been a roughly 45% increase in aggravated robbery, and murder has increased by 36% over the past decade. At the same time, the detection rate for murder has plummeted, with in 2021 only 15% of reported murders resulting in the detection. And that's where a suspect is identified, or there are in fact other technical ways to classify something as a detection without a suspect. But that doesn't mean that we have prosecutions in 15%. So murders, potentially our most serious violent crime, are basically occurring with almost no consequences. Now, none of us want to live in a securitized state. Both Bilkis and Brigadier Manamela made the point that police alone can't create safety. We don't want to leave our houses and see streets full of roadblocks and armed men and women who are coercing us to obey the law. I think rather we all want to live in a South Africa that's described in the National Development Plan, where we're all free to pursue our passions, to live in safety and to thrive. And to attain the vision of the NDP, government has for a long time now, well, since it was adopted in 2012, it's had a range of medium-term strategic goals, including creating jobs, solving the energy crisis, integrating our divided physical spaces, and delivering reliable quality basic services to everybody. Again, these are the common sense things we need to do to heal this country. We especially, I think, need to create dignified employment for all. And since the dawn of democracy, this has been the priority that people ask for when we do surveys on what people think government should address most pressingly. People want jobs. And this is the whole of society approach to safety that Bilk has talked about. And yet, well, it's been said that nothing stops a bullet like a job. I think this is an American saying. The idea that if everybody had a job, there would be far less reason for us to run around shooting each other. But I think I want to argue today that in South Africa, we must first stop the bullets from flying in order to grow the jobs. Similarly, we need to stop the violence and elite corruption to lay the foundation for the realization of the NDP, as Bilk has pointed out. So with this in mind, I want to suggest that government's priority should be should be safety first, following which all these other very necessary targets will far more easily slip into place. We need a safe, secure, predictable social and economic environment for us to realistically attain all those other goals of job creation, spatial integration, etc. This is the foundation of a healthy individual, a healthy neighborhood, a healthy city, and a healthy state. Creating safety is complicated, as Bilkis and Brigadier Manamela pointed out. It requires the whole of society. However, in contrast to some of the views I've held over the past decade, this is something I've come to believe quite strongly in recent years. I didn't feel the same in the past, but I think that safety must start with police. Police are always going to be limited in what they can achieve, but we are bleeding. I will describe that later, but we are bleeding in South Africa, and police can stop that bleeding for us so that we can start to address our other challenges. So police can't be everywhere, they can't do everything, but they can be where and do what matters most to reduce our worst harms. And that's how we're going to reduce serious violence by 2030, if we are going to achieve it. Police also embody the state's right to uphold the social contract. So we've got this amazing constitution, we've got this Bill of Rights, but they mean nothing if the state can't protect them for us. Police embody the state's claim to be able to protect those rights. When we can trust strangers, knowing that the state, through its police, will swiftly step in to protect our rights if they are threatened, then we can far more easily take risks in our relationships, in business, in education. And when we take risks in a safe environment, they're far more likely to lead to flourishing. We're also more likely to embrace the idea of the South African nation if we feel safe and feel able to take these risks, follow our passions. We embrace the idea of the South African nation, we're more likely to contribute to its tax system. This further empowers and strengthens government to realize the vision of the NDP and to address all of those other necessary goals that we have to address to create long-term safety. This sets us up for that whole of society approach to peace and security. In contrast, if we are insecure, when we see strangers as competitors, I saw somebody commented about our xenophobia in South Africa, when we see migrants as competitors, when we see our neighbors as competitors to our employment or threats to our property, when we perceive the state as corrupt and unable to keep us safe or create jobs, we're far more likely to opt out of the idea of the South African nation. We're more likely to engage in illicit economies, buy illegal cigarettes, buy illegal alcohol, buy stolen property, avoid paying tax. And we're more likely to use personal violence and vigilante violence, community violence, domestic violence to solve our problems, rather than calling on police, social workers, teachers, agents of the state who really should be embodying the rights and the values of our constitution. So left unchecked, corruption and violence create the conditions of societal and economic unraveling, pulling the vision of the NDP further and further beyond our reach. I often describe South Africa in terms of a young, generally healthy person who happens to have a life-threatening chronic disease for which they receive ongoing treatment. So try to bear with me here. If we imagine South Africa is a human being, a body, they're generally healthy, but they've got a life-threatening disease which could, in the long run, kill them. But they are receiving treatment for this life-threatening disease. It could also heal them. And here I would think about government's well-intentioned efforts to attract investment, improve education, build houses. Those are our efforts to cure this disease. However, this patient, South Africa, has been in a car accident and they've severed an artery in their neck. So they've cut their artery and they are bleeding out very quickly. If we leave that bleeding unchecked, they will die or they will be seriously weakened, making them more likely to succumb to their life-threatening illness, all that structural inequality, that poverty, that unemployment. Now, if we imagine paramedics coming to this accident scene, we wouldn't want them to arrive and say, this is a person suffering from a long-term chronic disease. Let's start giving them their medicine for their long-term problem. Rather, we would want them to stop the bleeding first. We have to stop the bleeding, get that young South African person, the imaginary South Africa, back into general health so that they can go back into their long-term treatment to treat the long-term life-threatening disease. But in South Africa, I think our paramedics, police and government as a whole are splitting their focus between the bleeding and the illness. And so we're having limited impact on both. And I'll explain a bit more about what I mean. The only way we can halve serious violence by 2030 is to reform the South African Police Service so that they can stop the bleeding in our national body where we are bleeding. We aren't bleeding equally across the country. As the Brigadier pointed out at the end, certain communities experience far more harm, far more violence, far more of the negative impacts of crime than many others. We have to focus on stopping the bleeding in those communities so that we can free up government resources to address everything else. For example, 20% of murders, many of you will know, are recorded at just 2% of police stations in South Africa. That's 30 police stations recording over 3,000, 4,000 murders a year. And in those policing areas, murder is clustering in time and place and locations. It's not the whole policing area, it's specific areas. Similarly, 50% of murders occur at 13% of stations, again, clustered in time and place. And in a sense, violence is then predictable. This isn't just a South African phenomenon, it's something we find across the world. And as a result, we should be able to focus on the places of bleeding and stop the flow. We can't expect police to be everywhere and do everything, but we can expect police to be where and do what matters most to stop the bleeding so that we can resuscitate South Africa, get us stable enough to then address all of those other factors, the housing, the unemployment, the inequality. If we're trying to do them both equally at the same time, we're splitting our focus, we're spreading our resources, we're unable to do either properly, and we remain continually both bleeding and chronically ill. So I'd argue that to halve violence by 2030, we need to stop the bleeding, and to do that, we need to fix our police. And this is where I'm slightly disagreeing with the Brigadier and with Focus and with me 10 years ago. I have also always said police aren't our solution, but I'm at the point where I think there's so much overwhelming evidence that across the world and in South Africa, serious violence, serious harm is clustered in predictable patterns, predictable places. And if we tackle each of those predictable patterns and places in a very careful, methodical, tailored way, we can have real impact. We can stop the bleeding and free up resources to have positive impact elsewhere. I know I've only got a few minutes left, Alvin. I will wrap up shortly. So first, I would say we need to reform the South African Police Service, and that's what I'm going to talk about in my last few minutes. I think there are a few challenges to reforming the South African Police Service. On the one hand, there's lower trust in the SAPS than at any other point in the last 30 years. Only 27% of people say they have some trust in police at the moment. And trust and morale in the organization is devastatingly low. There was a SAPS-run climate study presented in Parliament a couple of months ago, and that showed that roughly half of police surveyed thought that their colleagues were dishonest, abused their power, weren't disciplined, weren't ethical. 38% didn't look forward to going to work in the morning. 50% were unmotivated, and 78% were dissatisfied with the promotion process. So we've got the public not liking the SAPS, not trusting the SAPS. We've got the SAPS individuals struggling in the organization, not having faith in the organization. And these are big challenges, but we have to address them. We need to have a clear idea of we fix this, which will lead us to fixing that, which will lead to fixing that. A step-by-step theory of change, for lack of a better word, to guide us through this. I think that police are the face of the state on the streets, and they can shape both national and local culture. Every police action, statement, or omission signals to the rest of South Africa, all the rest of the residents, and to the world what is or isn't acceptable in the country. So if we want less violence, then police must use force reasonably. If we're going to reduce gender inequality and gender-based violence, police officials can't be flirting with or harassing members of the public. If we want to reduce road traffic fatalities, then police need to show us that they don't drive recklessly, and they must respond to those who do drive recklessly in front of them. We need police to embody the values and behavior that we would expect in our greatest leaders. I am running out of time. So let me just wrap up by saying research shows that when police are perceived as legitimate, the public public safety, social cohesion, compliance with the law, and trust in the state improves. At the moment, I think our police risk fracturing the nation. They push people out of the idea of the state so that people invest in private security, private healthcare, opt out of paying taxes wherever they can. We need to reverse this. We can reverse it. We need to reform the South African Police Service to do so. And I can speak more about the details during the Q&A if relevant, but I think to do this, we need to first reform the leadership of the South African Police Service. We need to get leadership buy-in, investing in a project of reform. We need to make sure the right people are in the right places. These recommendations have been in the NDP. They've been in various expert reports for a while. We need to see action on them. The primary goal of the SAPS and all police organizations in the country must first be winning public trust. It's very easy to bring down recorded crime, as somebody in the Q&A commented. Recorded crime tells us one thing, but murder is the only real indicator of overall violence. We also need to address the SAPS performance management system, I think. It currently incentivizes poor policing, again, because police are incentivized not to take on our cases when we report them because it looks bad for them, rather than, as Brigadier Manamela just said, please report your crime, because they need the data to help them have a positive impact. And finally, I think we need to focus on murder and elite corruption as our primary targets. So let's not try and spread policing resources everywhere. You can make a very rational case for murder is our most reliable, perhaps our only reliable indicator of violence. For every murder that occurs, there will be perhaps 10 attempted murders, 50 serious assaults, 100 common assaults, and making up the ratio. But there will be a spiraling down of other violent crime. So if we focus on where, when, and how, and around whom murder is most common, if we tailor our interventions, there is research evidence from around the world that this is perhaps the most likely way, the most effective way to reduce serious violence when and where it takes place. So my closing thoughts: democracy, economy, prosperity, and rights are all constrained without safety and security and trust. And we can bring all of those about, but our police must embody the values and behavior we expect from our most revered leaders. When they do, safety, well-being, national healing will accelerate. Police can't be everywhere or do everything, but they can be where and do what matters most to stop the bleeding and make South Africa at least 50% safer by 2030. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Now our last but not least speaker, Mr. Foshier Begas. We asked Foshier to tell us what is the response of business in answering this call to halve crime and violence by 2030. What is business doing to support government's call to achieve this target? Over to you, Foshier.
Thank you, Ollie. Yeah, I think if I listen to the other speakers, they've really touched on the points, on the most important points. The last speaker, Andrew, was quite on target with what he said, and that's my views as well, or our views as well, is that you have to start with the police. And I know my task was to see, how business can assist, and I will definitely touch on that. And I think the reformation of the police are extremely important, and we will assist wherever we can. Now, we do have a number of initiatives and projects with the police where we assist, and I will get to them as well. Something that I can perhaps mention, because it's now in the media, is that we are assisting the NPA on a number of levels, which includes providing of forensic analysts, investigators, and we will see where this goes. And that is a turnaround strategy for them. We're not going to be there for the long run. We need to carry that intelligence, that knowledge over to them, and then they must be able to keep their people I think the same sits with the police. We've done many trainings with the police, and which actually was quite excellent training, where we get specialists from business to train the police, and especially, I can mention the Hawks, PPCI, where we've done, I think, state-of-the-art training for them on forensic investigations and cybercrime. And my concern always is with these trainings are these police going to stay? These members are going to stay in the police, or they're already back in business, or coached by business. But you have to address that as well. So I fully agree with that. I think on the white papers that were mentioned is, I'm almost at the point as well where a lot of us are that we say, okay, we see all these white papers. When is anything going to happen? If you look at the NCPS of 96, and I was involved in it from 97. One of the projects that was in the NCPS that really worked well, and is until today, or actually until 3 years ago, one of the, I think the best examples of a crime reduction initiative was the motor vehicle crime one. And I was involved in it from 97. I can tell you that most of the reduction of motor vehicle crime was not things that the police implemented. It was actually the Department of Transport, where they disrupted the market for stolen and hijacked vehicles. And sometimes I think we have to be a lot. I think we must be clever when we address crime. Really. If you look at murder, like Andrew said, sorry, I don't know if you exactly said that, Andrew. I might have missed you a little bit there, but that's the most accurate type of crime that is reported to the police. Rape can still be not reported, but as soon as somebody is murdered, I think we've got a very strong correlation between what is actually happening in the country and what is underreported. I think it's so important to understand that. But if you look at businesses' problems, is the violence. I think for us to convince business from overseas to come and invest in South Africa is a massive problem if you have this high levels of violence, and it is really high. Now, I know that Andrew mentioned a few indexes there, or researches. We've looked at the Nimbus index for a number of years now, which is a perception index, which can be completely wrong. But they rate us as the third most dangerous country in the world. Now, I know that the war-torn countries and so on were excluded from your perception type of indexes because nobody wants to invest in those countries. But South Africa is still seen as a possibility of investment. But if you are rated as the third most dangerous country in the world, we are going to struggle to get business in South Africa, to invest in South Africa from overseas. And when we touch on extortions, I think it was one of the executives of Rio Tinto that was murdered because they didn't pay the extortion fees. I mean, that is absolutely bad news for business. So how do we change this? I think this is something that we must really focus on. The Zondo Commission's reports didn't do us well. I mean, it was damning. And I think we all know that as soon as corruption are escalating, almost seen as institutionalized, where government gets involved in crime, it just leads to, further to organized crime. And we must remember ourselves here as well. So that's something that business can address on their side, but government as well. And then the looting of July 2021 was absolutely bad news. There are many companies that said to us, if we have a similar occurrence, we will have to pull out of the country, just not worth us working on it. And I don't want to go into the research of that because it was not my research, but there is a definite correlation between the political calendar and looting. And it comes down to things like bad service delivery. As soon as there's a election coming up, even on the local authority level, if the people are not happy because they don't have water, they don't have sanitation, and they don't have roads, the only way that they can express themselves is in looting. And then it gets out of hand. So what can we do about this? from business side, from our side, specifically Business Against Crime, and we really do not like to criticize the police because we rather work with them as is collaboration. I think it is a well-known fact that there are more information in the private sector of criminals than in the police. There are more technology available in the private sector than currently in the police. With one of our initiatives that we have, the Eyes and Ears initiative that you mentioned, I mean, we do from private-owned cameras, we get about 14 million checks a day on the vehicle of interest list. I mean, compare that to a police officer, going on the radio and say, control, please check Alpha Bravo Charlie 298 Golf Papa, and then stand by. So there's a lot of information, a lot of technology in private business that we do bring to the party. During the looting, and even today, there are at least 8 private security helicopters in the air, constantly. I mean, they do patrols with cash and transit. They do on the fuel pipelines. They have cameras. They have got CCTV cameras. We are currently monitoring more than 7,000 CCTV cameras in Johannesburg from our monitor center, and about the same number of number plate recognition cameras in the country. So there is a lot of technology available in business which we need to. What you're already making, we're giving the information to the police free of charge. The challenge is now for the police to respond to that. We're flooding the police with information from the private sector, and that's again where the formation of the SAPS comes in. In a meeting that I had with the minister and the national commissioner, I said to them, sometimes the police, which is a massive company, I mean, we can't deny that. It's almost like a dinosaur just going on. And the dinosaur got extinct. So we will have to change the way that we're doing policing soon. Otherwise, we're definitely not going to reach the 2030 mark. It's violence. Now, if you look at violence, where it starts, if you look at the young people of South Africa, why do you get young people that are the age of 12 committing serious offences? We always hear about poverty, inequality, unemployment, abuse of alcohol. All of those things do play a role, without a doubt. But when are these young people exposed to that? I mean, from the start almost. In the environments that they have, where they're exposed to things like that. The gangsterism. I mean, for a young person that doesn't go to school necessarily or doesn't have a job, it is almost a prestige type of linkage that they can have if he joins a gang. And it's just that that bad experiences that they are experiencing or are involved in every day. And it includes, the serious crimes that they see from a very, very young age. Most of the criminals that have been locked up, if you look at the research that was done, they have experienced or witnessed things like rape, murder, all of that from a very, very young age. So we will have to start there as well. I mean, you'll remember in the early days of Business Against Crime when we had these initiatives going out to schools and doing plays and trying to motivate them to stay away from that. But it was not always successful. That's from a young side. So there's definitely influence that needs, or something that needs to happen in the schools that focuses on convincing these young people to up their moral standards. I mean, and that is another thing that is quite important. What in fact, is causing or have an influence on crime. One of the biggest things is your moral standards. And the research shows that, and it's not always this, I'm not talking about the religious moral standards, I'm talking about the moral standards of your population. Some of the research shows that people, even if the gains are high, they will not break the law because they have standards that tells them, you should not break the law. The whole thing of your pleasure, pain and pleasure experience that you have? What is the chances of that you will experience pain compared to the pleasure of the crime that they're doing? And that goes for everything. So the problem that we have now is that we set with low moral standards, and it starts at a young age. It goes through to the adults. What makes them to break these moral standards is what we've mentioned: poverty, inequality, alcoholism, and it's a cycle of just increasing the crime because it never stops. And I agree there with Andrew. We need to sort out the police first, so that the pain, the chances of experiencing pain when you commit the crime is very, very high, and not get away with it. And in interviews that we had with cash and transit robberies, they don't calculate the possibility of experiencing the risk of being arrested, and to see if it is worth it. They actually go further and say, what are the chances that I will be convicted? And I think we know where we sit to the conviction rate. So all of that needs to be improved. The whole criminal justice system, from detection all the way through investigations, all the way through to the prosecutions, and even incarceration of the criminal and to stay in it. Because the pain side of this equation is just not high enough for them to not to commit the crime. At the same time, if you know you're not going to be caught and you are poor, and there is a lot of inequality in the country, and there is alcoholism and drug abuse, you will break your own moral rules and commit the crime. So I don't know if it is possible by 2030. I really hope so, because business can't afford the current high levels of violence, crime, and in crime. And like I've mentioned, the looting and so on. So that is, I don't want to repeat what everybody said, but I do strongly believe that the reformation of the police are extremely important. Business doesn't want to do the job of the police. I think that is the first thing that we must understand. Although there is a very strong private security industry, private security must focus on what they do, and the police must focus on what they do. There is a lot of overlap nowadays, and that is because of the failure within the police. I mean, if you had a proper police force working, you wouldn't need that strong private security industry. And that sounds a little bit wrong from my side, because we want business to be strong, and private security is one of the big businesses in South Africa. So I hope I've made sense. From business, we definitely would like to collaborate with government. We're already doing that with the police, with the Department of Transport, with the NPA. We have resources that we gladly share with the police, but we can't keep on doing that if the police are not performing what they need to do. It doesn't make sense for us, business sense for us, if we spend 30-40 million a year to assist the police, the NPA, and government, and we don't see the results of that. And I know it is difficult. I mean, I've been involved in this for many years. It is not easy to turn around a crime wave, especially if it's accepted by high officials in business and in government. So we need to change that. Thank you, Alan. That's all from my side for now.
Thank you very much. We have got a number of questions, and we are running behind schedule, but it's the nature of this kind of discussion, because of their importance, that you might not have enough time. I'll just go through the questions on the chat from Edda Nzobe. She's saying that change in the mindset of politicians, police, and people. We are currently dealing with MEC Popira Matuba and people like Gayton Mackenzie openly calling up on violence, which is criminal, just because they are people in power. They are not above the rule of law. Moreover, we need politicians to stop stealing from people, so that we have resources available for the people. The Nkandla inquest, it's a recent example that comes in mind. The broader mental changes to the people and policing. There are no victimless crimes out there. crime has longer lasting impact that people care to think of. Every theft or whatever crime creates a ripple effect. Crime requires transparency and accountability. It's not as simple and straightforward. It's a long process. Then from Zamandulo Shezi, she's saying, Brigadier Manamela, is there any interest in changing the strategy SAPS had always used to curb crime? Because the stats indicate that those tactics or strategies are not producing expected outcomes. Crime is more prevalent. The cases are becoming more violent. I'm convinced the numbers SAPS are sharing are only reported crimes. These numbers could be way higher than what we are made to believe. As a female citizen, I get scared of living in my own country since random shooting and rapes are now common. And I think when Andrew spoke, he also touched on this issue. Mr. Sam Fikiri, I would like you to put your question on the chat. It will assist us to manage the time. The strategy, this is from Toli Afonso. The strategy is a duplicate of NCPS. I think, Bilkis, this one it's directed at you. And specifically, the extension of the 7-point plan resulting from the review of the criminal justice system pillar adopted by Cabinet on 7 November 2007. I request bilateral discussion with the Secretariat. From the 7-point plan, only 1 point was successfully achieved. That is the establishment of coordinating and management structure, the NEEC, PEEC, REEC, DEEC. I'm sure Bilkis will understand what all those abbreviations are all about. The remaining 6 points are what informs the pillars of the new strategy. Let's have further bilateral discussion. I'm passionate about the topic, and that's an extension of from Toli Afonso, who would like to have an engagement with Bilkis and the team from the Secretariat. Roger on LinkedIn, how exactly are local government being held accountable for the services which will help to reduce crime? Have you considered setting up collaboration between local government and local law enforcement to ensure correct identification of the risk areas? Edna also on LinkedIn for Sibusiso Mavimbela. Immigration is not SA's biggest problem. What's the point of fighting people working? It makes no sense when it contributed to the GDP and tax payments. South Africans, when it comes to economic woes, they hide behind foreigners and use them as scapegoats. Direct economic issues to the government. This is a problem across Africa. Our governments are failing us. Edna for Roger Bartman says, first, the police needs to be properly trained. They are clearly not the best. And Robert Chawanda says, how did the police affect or cause the increase of sexual crime? I think it's a slide that Brigadier Manamela referred to when they were saying there was an increase on sexual crime detected by the police. Maybe you will have to clarify that, Dr. Manamela. Lucille Mayer says, thank you for the inputs. An important recognition that is required is that we are traumatized. We are a traumatized nation. Having experienced colonization and apartheid, we are descendants of enslaved, oppressed, and exploited people. A huge part of our strategy, including the pillars already mentioned, is the trauma disruptions and the healing-centered work we must do. We have been shaped by violence. We must bring this into the conversation, please. Then Agnes Mandi says, crime in South Africa has skyrocketed. And I believe there are cases that are not reported due to the police attitude and how they handle theft cases, for example, in town, and that many people lose their gadgets like cell phones and laptops. Thieves just break in while people are looking on. They carry guns and Sharon objects around the suburbs and stab and kill people at will, rob them, and even threaten. What measures are there to protect ordinary people like pedestrians and motorists who are robbed and killed by robbers? Jacqueline says SEPS is quiet on e-policing, and now we are on fourth industrial revolution. How is SEPS assisting top 30 contract crime station in terms of resource allocation? Because most stations, they have challenge of manpower and shortage of vehicles. Year after year, I think SAPs need to revive their strategy on resource allocation. For example, some stations you find they have shortage of manpower and a lot of vehicles which are parked at stations without drivers, and other stations they have manpower and shortage of vehicles. And Agnes on LinkedIn, is there any plan that is there to protect the ordinary people, pedestrians and motorists who lose their gadgets during broad daylight? People are robbed, stabbed and killed by these robbers using guns. And Sharon objects while other people watch day in, out. It is dangerous to just take a walk or jog because these guys will not spare you. And Ronald Morris says, how effectively does the police use intelligence to both prevent and reduce crime? How is SAPS planning to restore trust between them and the communities? Toli Afonso, let's not forget chapter 12 of the NDP called for alignment of all strategic plans of JCPS cluster with the 7-point plan. However, they were or are no monitoring mechanisms. I'm aware of the implementation. It was acknowledged that SA was a violent country and the call was made to discourage the communities and engaging in any form of violence. We fail to educate the communities. It's never too late to retrace our steps to check where we missed it as a country. And I think this matter, for sure, touched on it in his input. The crime stats, everywhere it is used in law enforcement agencies around the world, do not address the needs of communities they serve. Crime stat, it's more concerned about comp stat, it's more concerned about crime stats. I don't know what comp stat mean, but maybe the people who deal with this Brigadier Manamela will understand that question. Sikolwa Miezi, my question to Brigadier Manamela, what are the most likely events that causes increase in kidnappings and the motives of those criminals based on SAP's report? Toli Afonso, I agree with you, Dr. Fall. There are many competent and capable employees in SAPS. Almost other reasons for the restructuring and reorganization of SAPS was to match and place employees in line with their skills. I'm optimistic with platforms like this that we will turn things around. During 2010, visible policing strategy was introduced, and each sector, I missed that. There's another question that came. During 2010, visible policing strategy was introduced, and each sector was allocated 2 cars and cell phones, and it was working successfully to reduce crime. Now, SAPS is no longer implementing the strategy adequately. And I think also the issue was raised by Foshier when he made his input. The last input is from Samuel Fikiri Tinini. I have had different presenters, but my main concern is that to have crime and violence by 2030 should not be a mere conference topic, but should be rather a mega project involving different stakeholders, including government, private sectors, civil society, communities, and business. Secondly, the proliferation of firearms. The government should be very selective about who should carry a gun and who should not. We understand that senior government officials, police, and other security industries can possess the firearms. But what about civilians? For which ends? I think this should be looked at, and restrictions should be severely made. To reach 50% reduction in crime and violence, we should aim to reach 85% due to limitations. From this, if enough effort is put in place, we can hope for the 50%. Crimes happening in recreational facilities show ineffectiveness of the existing safety measures, if any, on those areas. Hence, there is a need to improve safety measures in hotspots. I have heard, it's just correcting the other line. I think I will now hand over to the panelists in the same order that we have presented to respond, but this becomes your parting shots. And what you need to do as you are responding, just do it in a form of a pledge, including the steps that your organization is embarking on in support of this strategy towards the achievement of halving crime and violence by 2030, as well as what expectations do you have from society? How should society support your initiative in making sure that we achieve that objective? I'll start with you, Bilkis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rapia, and thank you for the questions. I did try to respond to some in the chat, but let me just start with Toli. I have sent Toli my email address so that we can meet. He's studying and he would like to engage me on this topic. And yes, Toli, we did borrow a lot from the NCPS. I did mention that. We did, when our review process found that there was a whole lot of good stuff in the NCPS which wasn't being implemented. So, Roger, I also responded to you on the joint operations between local governments, the city and Metro Police, the municipal police, and SAPS, but also that from a national level, the Department of Cooperative Governance is doing a lot of work to ensure that local government is considering and implementing safety initiatives. Lucille, you're 100% right about the trauma and violence that as South Africans we have suffered and we're suffering. Mr. Rapi, I would like to share the strategy that we did, because it's now a public document, so that it's open for everybody to read and see what we are proposing. When we took it to cabinet, the president, when he ended up, he said it is still a working document, right? So it's something that if Lucille, there are more inputs, apart from what we have there, please contact us. I'm going to put my email address on this platform as well, so for people to contact us if you need to. In terms of Andrew, I want to, before I start talking on policing, I want to agree with you that we're not saying that the police don't have a role in safety. I agree 100% that the police needs to professionalize, the police needs to change, there needs to be a transformation process. And like Fushia Burgess mentioned, I think everybody's tired of policies, and so we have done a lot of research on this as well. We got a lot of documents that SAPS needs to implement. You even mentioned the performance indicators needs to change, and even in that, Andrew, by the way, assisted us with the performance indicator guidelines, and we did an assessment of SAPS strat plan and SAPS APPs, and we found that they are using a lot of the recommendations. For example, you mentioned trust in the police. They got a lot of indicators on trust on the police. So yes, so we are making an impact in that way, and you made an impact as well. And I agree with you that legitimacy and trust in the police are the most fundamental, basic tenets that you need in the police. If the public can't trust the police, then we are really in a crisis. Somebody raised the issue about e-policing and resource allocation. So yes, we also looked at e-policing, and we've come back, and strangely we just presented that to the minister recently, maybe 2 weeks ago, e-policing, and minister called it sophisticated, and he's very happy with what we're recommending. But SAPS has to fix up the basics. So for example, interconnectivity is important. The fact that police stations don't have networks and network cables, that's critical. And I don't know, Fushia, if you're coming here, I know you say you don't want to start doing the police work, but things like connectivity are so important at police station level if we want to modernize SAPS. And it's not only about modernizing SAPS, it's about giving them the basics, so how do we do that? But also, Fushia, I'd like to meet with you. You mentioned a lot of things that the private sector has been doing, and that you mentioned you met with the National Commission and the Minister, but we'd like to meet with you as well. So I'll get you a number from Mr. Rapia, but I think we have spoken before, last year, I think. Resource allocation also, we did a study and we found the resource allocation is skewed. And that's something that SAPS is working on. We see the language of our documents in SAPS presentation to Parliament as well, where they are working and looking at how to ensure that resource allocation is not skewed. And then someone mentioned the issue of the firearms, and who should be issued with firearms. Currently, we are amending the firearms bill. So it's on its way to Cabinet for permission to be introduced into Parliament. That's the SAPS amendment bill and the firearms bill. And that should be there in the next few weeks. I think there's a presentation to Parliament tomorrow as well on the SAPS amendment bill, so if you can log on there. But my point on the firearms bill is that while we have closed for public comments, you will still have an opportunity to comment in the parliamentary process, because then Parliament will take comments from the public. So I'm sounding like a bureaucrat, but let me stop there. So, Mr. Rapia, your parting shots on how what we can do in closing. I mentioned that we're not implementers, but we facilitate implementation. We do research, we draft policies, but we've undertaken to ensure that these policies and strategies are implemented, and we facilitated implementation on a lot of these issues. So there were a lot of good pointers that came out today. I'm going to be taking this to our exco, but also that, we are committed. I don't want to be a bureaucrat. I worked as a researcher in a civil society before this, so I have a personal need to see these things work. I don't want to be getting a salary and then make sure that things are sitting on the desk. So we want to ensure that the strategy is done. We do a lot of work with DCOG and local government to ensure that they do half crime, and basically we're asking them to do their job, nothing else. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bilkis. Brigadier Manamela. Oh, now we see you. That's great. You see,
see.
great.
Yeah. As the crime registrar, we are not an operational environment in the SAPS. So what we pledge as the crime registrar is to continuously provide informative crime statistics, which operational environments will be enabled to utilize such statistics to operationalize them in terms of development of strategies to address developing crime phenomenon in the country. And I've heard you when we were reading quite a number of questions, and some of those questions when we were reading them, they were more on the side of the operational side of the SAPS, because we are solely specific in terms of what we are doing in the SAPS. We are solely providing the SAPS with the crime specific or crime scope for a particular time frame, to say for this particular time frame, the crimes that were reported in the country were this much. And operational environment would then take those crimes and develop strategies and also action those strategies in terms of their deployments to counter the effects of crime. However, on the issues of the top 30 stations, that the questions were asked about what the SAPS is doing about the top 30, capacitating the top 30 stations. The SAPS has initiated a resource committee that is solely looking at prioritizing resourcing of the top 30 stations in terms of manpower, in terms of finances, and all other support that these stations would require to effectively deal with crime. On the issues of whether the strategies of the SAPS is working or not, we all know that crime is dynamic, and also is the modus operandi that the perpetrators of crime utilizes. So as and when we observe the change in the modus operandi and certain crime comes into the picture, the SAPS amends its strategies to ensure it is solely targeted at eradicating those developing crime trends and so forth. On the issues of kidnapping, I think the slides that I presented, they were very clear in terms of the issues that comes with the kidnapping. There were a number of kidnappings that occurred as a result of hijacking. There were kidnappings that were as a result of robbery related. There were kidnappings that were rape related, tax related, domestic violence related, and there were also kidnappings that were for ransom, as well as and so on. The use of crime stats or com stats not addressing the needs of the people. We must bear in mind that the use of crime statistics, it's solely to inform the police in terms of the levels of crime in the country. And therefore, the police should then come up with strategies and ways and means of circumventing those crimes from happening and deploying appropriately at identified hotspots so that those levels of crime can be reduced or drastically obliterated. There was also the issue around the increase of sexual offenses as a result of police action. The question was, how did the police increase those kind of levels of crime detected? I think the crimes detected as a result of police actions, these are the crimes that the police when they perform their duties through operations, through stop and searches, through intelligence-led and so forth. They are able to detect some of these crimes. So from time and again, whenever the police undertake this kind of initiatives, we would see those levels of crimes increasing because they were able to detect even more crimes than those that were reported. I think that's all that I managed to jot down. And yeah, that's it. But in terms of what the crime registrar in the South African Police pledge is, we will forever try our utmost best to provide informative statistics that generate social debates to enable policymakers to develop strategies, policies to circumvent crime and criminal elements in the country. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Brigadier Manabela. There is a request from Sam Fikiri for the PowerPoint to be emailed. Would you mind to share their PowerPoint with us, and then we can send it to
the PowerPoint can be made. Yeah, the PowerPoint can be made available. There's no problem with it. Sorry.
Yes.
Can I have perhaps can I have the email address?
You can send it to Anita. We will communicate. We have your contacts. We'll communicate with you. Then you can send it to us. We will make sure everyone gets the presentation. Now over to you, Dr. Fall.
Thank you. And yeah, also just to say thanks to Brigadier Manamela. I know it's difficult to represent the SAPS in these forums, and I think the crime registrar has developed quite impressively over the last decade. There's some very good data coming from them. I just wrote down some short answers as we were going through the questions in the chat. So to Edda, I agree the state must, through the SAPS and NPA, hold itself accountable, including the executive. So that's one of the reasons I think to fix everything, we need to start with the SAPS. If the SAPS can operate independently, including by holding corrupt members of the executive or senior government leaders, members of industry accountable, that's an important start. Zamandulo, the SAPS uses a handful of blunt tools, in my opinion, to do its work. So we've got roadblocks, we've got VCPs, we've got stop and search, we've got visits to secondhand dealerships. And these are often necessary tools, but my view is that the SAPS kind of says, okay, well, we've got an uptick in the crime, let's reach into our toolbox and we'll throw some VCPs at it, we'll throw some stop and search. And this is one of the challenges. We need to tailor our interventions to each challenge. And we can't do that everywhere. Police can't respond to everyone equally, but we've got these bleeding spots, and that's where we need to go in, analyze, tailor our interventions to address the drivers of that serious violence. And Brigadier Manamela talked about the resourcing of priority stations. Resources are a start, but they alone aren't a solution. You can have very badly managed resources. I'm sure any people who've spoken to SAPS members will tell you about visiting police stations, and you'll see cars that aren't being driven simply because the tires are worn out and nobody's bothered to change them. We have to get the leadership right. We need the leaders at those stations who have the authority and motivation to use those resources, and who have a performance management system that gives them the flexibility to tailor their work to their problems rather than needing to meet these nationally determined targets. And in terms of crime data, it's established all over the world. There is a police crime stats anywhere in the world are only an indicator of harm. It's not the SAPS by itself, it's the best police in the world. There will always be people who don't report crime. Most crime probably isn't reported. So in South Africa, we know 50% of assaults aren't reported. I think the last victim survey showed that less than 50% of home robberies are reported, which is shocking. People coming into houses and taking things with a threat of force, not being reported to police. And that's an indicator of the breakdown. And that's why we need to look at murder. Tolly, thank you for your support always. I know there are lots of dedicated SAPS members like yourself who are ready to reform and to help lead the change that we need. And I also support your call for a focus on the 7-point plan to fix the criminal justice system and bring back the rule of law. We've got all of these great recommendations and guidelines and commitments from the last 20 years, and we just need to have people act on them, which takes me back to why I started with needing to get the leadership right. Roger, I agree that there can and should be better collaboration between local government and law enforcement. The challenge in South Africa is we've got the separation of the spheres of government. So the SAPS is a national entity, local government is local, and they don't report to each other. In a place like Cape Town, Johannesburg, Victoria, you've got local metro police, but they don't have the same powers. Again, I think if the SAPS, this separation of government doesn't need to be a limitation, but we need head office in the SAPS to trust frontline station commanders to work with local government more. At the moment, if you are a station commander, you are beholden to those national targets and those national forces. We need station commanders to have the freedom to be creative, to partner with locals. And of course, in many ways, they are able to. But I think there is something that can be unlocked there. And in the Western Cape, at least, there are lots of efforts between the City of Cape Town, the Western Cape government, and the Western Cape SAPS to do that. But it's not easy. Lucille, nice to see you. I fully agree with you that we have been shaped by violence, that we are all suffering national trauma, some people far more than others. And I agree with Brigadier Manamela and Bilkis that safety is a whole of society mission, as I mentioned. But my focus on police is simply that in order to give us the space to address our trauma, in order to give us the space to reflect on our history, we need to stop the bleeding. And that's where effective policing can create that space in which all of this trauma, this healing, this building of houses, this addressing of poor education can take place. So yeah, absolutely, I agree with everyone. Everything is whole of society. I just focused on the police because I think that's where we need to start. Jacqueline, I agree that it would be much better if we could report crime online. I mean, I don't know if that's what you meant by e-policing, but I think it would be fairly simple to have an online portal for certain types of crime. I realize there are legal complications, it's a sworn statement, etc. But in terms of the Brigadier's call for us to report crime, I think far more people would report certain types of crime if we could simply input something on our cell phones or on a website. Of course, we don't all have access to the internet, but I can also see how the government wouldn't want that because you would see a surge in property-related crime in particular. But it would be very helpful in understanding our risks in the country. Reynold, I can't comment too much on intelligence. I think it probably works well in some areas. I think it's probably totally broken in others. It's probably criminal in other areas. And in terms of trust, Bilkis mentioned, yes, the SAPS has introduced some trust indicators to its performance system. The performance system as a whole is impressive, but at a station operational level, it often just gets shrunk down to what the reported crime says. And so I think the culture needs to change and those indicators need to change so that the trust measurements become more important. And one of the ways that the research shows this can be done is simply by treating everyone fairly, always communicating, being polite, being respectful, letting people ask questions, and we aren't there in South Africa. I had to call the police this weekend, and the first thing they asked me was, "Where do you live?" Presumably because they didn't want to have to solve my problem. They were hoping I lived in a different area. Samuel, I agree, firearms control is one of the most important ways in which we can reduce serious violence in South Africa. Sorry, let me close that. And finally, my closing comment on what the ISS is doing. Firstly, I again want to just appreciate the members of government, the Civilian Secretariat, the SAPS. I know there are so many really dedicated public servants who are working hard in difficult circumstances, and that it can be frustrating for them. And I am very grateful for that. The ISS is a non-profit organization. We work across the continent to try to promote human security in Africa. And the team that I'm part of focuses specifically on crime and violence in South Africa. I've got colleagues who coordinate the Violence Prevention Forum in South Africa. Feel free to Google that. There's a website. It's a coalition of stakeholders from across government and civil society working to address the primary drivers of violence. So again, recognizing that police aren't the overall answer, we have to fix this broken society. And that's what the Violence Prevention Forum focuses on. We've got other colleagues who focus on supporting and reforming the SAPS and the National Prosecuting Authority. Please also Google the ISS Crime Hub. That's a website where you can get the last 30 years of crime data with maps and charts. You can look at SAPS statistics. It's a great source of free information for anyone working in this area. And my work focuses on promoting evidence-based policing. So again, saying, let's not just have this blunt toolbox of BCPs and roadblocks and stop and search. There is good crime science that tells us what works and what doesn't. And we need to start thinking and assessing and evaluating what we do. And that requires bringing researchers and police together to take an analytical approach to crime and violence in South Africa. We're hosting a conference in October. Everyone's welcome. We'll probably be in Gauteng. But yeah, thanks so much for having me today. And thanks so much to everybody who's working to make South Africa safer.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for sharing.
Thank you. It is always good to be the last speaker, and then you get a few tips what to say, and then also they've addressed all the difficult ones as well. So, but let me focus on what we can do from business side. You know, it was mentioned that perhaps you should get involved more from the Secretariat side, and we would gladly do that. I think the important thing for us is from Business Against Crime and from business is that, first of all, you know, we must be welcome to assist. I can't tell you how many times we've started with initiatives under a specific command structure, the National Commission or something like that, and a few years later, we're seen as enemy number one. So that must be changed, and before we really get involved in some of these issues. And I think our relationship with the South African Police Service at this stage is the best that it's been for many years. And we haven't even really gone into detail with meeting with the new National Commissioner, but it's quite important for business to get involved when invited and when welcome. We said the same to Advocate Batoy when she asked us to get involved. You know, we want to meet with the different divisions and to understand that we are really welcome there. And, you know, we don't want to again go on a few million rand trip and then whatever we've done, you know, is not needed or doesn't, or they don't want it. And that comes down to the sustainability of everything that we've done. To give you one example at least, a few years ago, we spent quite a lot of effort and getting the government garage that fixes the vehicles in the police sorted out. And it actually worked very well. And to my surprise, I get more and more people telling me from CPS that they are fixing police vehicles. Why? You know, why? What happened to that initiative? You know, we can't sustain it. We can't stay on certain projects forever. And to see that the guidelines, the things that we've implemented are still in place. And that comes back again to your performance management system. And that is one of the requirements that we set out now for any initiative that we do with the police, that they are properly defined performance indicators that is monitored on a high level. Otherwise, we're just going to waste our time again. So, but the current initiatives that we had, for example, the Eyes and Ears initiative, it worked very well. It was constantly growing from 2018 when the police requested us to start the initiative. It is constantly growing and doing very well. I think on the police side, there's a shortcoming, and that's to respond to it. I mean, that's all linked to budget constraints, unmotivated police, unskilled police, perhaps, crimes that's got higher priorities than other crimes, which you can understand. I mean, the murder of somebody is definitely more important than a hijacked vehicle driving around. You can understand that, but that comes back to the no tolerance type of idea. Is if you really want to have a no tolerance to crime focus in the South African Police Service, they must be able to respond to crimes, and they can't now. They just don't have enough vehicles, they don't have a budget, they don't have enough members. And we do set the budget constraints all over the country. It's not only in the police, and we have respect for that. So the policing will have to be better, in the sense that it must be intelligence driven. To get your focus, the police's focus on the right crimes in the right places, and not just have people all over the place running around and stopping vehicles, but more focused approach. And we will gladly assist with that, without a doubt. And we are doing it. We will gladly assist. I think we will share with the police as much information as we can put our hands on. And we're already doing that, like I've mentioned. I don't know if I've mentioned the numbers, but this last month we've reached a high, and we're sharing more than 800 confirmed pieces of information of incidents happening with the police per day countrywide. So we then now need a response from the police to be able to respond to that. The crime stats was addressed by Andrew. For us, it's about the rates. The whole graph. It's not about numbers. We always had under a recording of crime, always on a reporting of crimes, and I think we live with that. It's about the trend that's important. When it comes to murder, I'm sure it is much more accurate than a stolen vehicle. Especially when the vehicle is recovered before you have insurance claim, and that might also be one of the highest accurate statistics, because there are insurance claims involved in it. But assault and rape, those things have always been underreported. And now it's not only about reporting a crime that might put you in a bad light, also the difficulty of reporting crime. And that's again where the e-reporting of crime comes in. It is actually easy to do that. It is not rocket science to do that. It's really not. We have systems, like I mentioned, that we get information from our partners outside that's handling that type of volumes, without a doubt. The police can easily do that. There are laws, but the law can always be changed, or provision can be made for that. One of the things, for example, that I cannot understand is with the firearms renewals. It is such a tedious process that's putting a whole division of police under pressure with very little results. I can't remember when last I've seen a vehicle, a firearm license being renewed in time. It is unnecessary. The policeman there, the trained policeman that was appointed on the police, actually police work and not administration work. So a little bit more clever policing to be done as well. You don't need people to stand in the queue at the service center for hours to get documents certified. One good example that I've seen is at Littleton Police Station. We've actually moved the certification of documents to another building, and it works so well because your serious crimes can be reported. But the reporting of crime, the difficulty of reporting of crime, will always cause under reporting, and then it makes policing difficult. I mean, if you don't have all the crimes reported, how do you handle that? And we will gladly assist. So our pledge from businesses, we've been assisting from 1996 or 1997. It went through bad times, well, business against crime and police partnerships, but it is good at this stage again. I think our request, and that is perhaps to the Secretariat, is that we formalize this again with Parliament, with government, and that it be form part of the police's strategy to fight crime. Partnerships are part of it, but I think that the looseness of it is a massive problem. We've referred to, for example, on the station level, where partnerships should be. Now, I agree with that, but be very careful. With the Eyes and Ears initiative, before a private security company can join us, it goes through a scanning process within the police. So then the police disqualify a security company, for example, to be a partner in the ICDS initiative. But at the police station, it's a big friend of the police commissioner, of the station commander, and they sit in the same office and they work together, and so it's sort of the double standard. So yes, I fully agree with partnerships on a local level, but that must be formalized. And that's just one of the things that I've mentioned. So our pledge is we will gladly assist within our means. Thank you.
Thank you very much for our panelists. You were excellent, very excellent inputs, and I like your conclusions that it's practical. This strategy and this goal cannot sit in government's shelves. We have to make sure that we implement that. And I thank you, our participants, for staying a bit longer. We have gone over our time by 45 minutes, and I thank you that we still have 30 people out there. For me, the parting shot is there must be true leadership in the JCPS cluster. Fix the police, because we are currently bleeding. You cannot talk about other things when the police is not strong. The culture of lawlessness in our country needs to be addressed, and it needs the communities and everyone to deal with that. Business and civil society, they are committed to support government in dealing with a crime. Government must take that a hand and work with business and civil society, not just as and when it's convenient. It must become part of how we work together and deal with crime. I mean, the statistic of 15% of cost of crime to the GDP, it's huge. So if it's costing us 15% of the GDP, then it must be a priority, And I think the issue about, because I've been in a lot of interaction wherein, especially with sexual offenses and so on, people talk about, yeah, this is not the true reflection of what is happening there. And the issue about focus on the trend, because the trend will tell you is going up or down. The number might not be the exact, but it helps you to actually focus on the hotspots area. I think the issue of the firearms amendment bill, it also talks, there's a question that we raised to say, should the police be responsible for the firearm registration? Or should we have people dedicated to deal with this, and the police must focus on policing issue? So thank you, colleagues. And let those commitments and those meetings that you have committed to, let it happen. Let's bring others who are not part of this discussion so that we support government and we participate fully in making sure that we meet this target of halving crime and violence by 2030. And Andrew said it's achievable if all of us put our hands on the deck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Recording stopped.
Bye.